are live. So we will call the policy committee meeting to order at 4:39. Mr. Harris, would you take the roll, please?
Yes, ma'am. Dr. Yeager.
Here.
Dr. Gant.
Here.
Mr. Davis.
Here.
Dr. Maddox.
I don't believe Dr. Maddox is here. Well, so we have two board members elect who are joining us by invitation, Humby Anderson and Nicole Hall. Okay, I think they both said they're here. Okay.
Yes, I'm here. This is Nicole. I'm here.
Okay, great.
Humby Anderson's here.
Thank you. Okay, so moving forward, there were the minutes from our last meeting to be approved. Were there any comments or questions about the minutes? I thought they were fine. If there are no comments or questions, can I get a motion, please?
So moved.
To approve the minutes?
Second.
Move to approve the minutes.
Thank you. And second from Dr. Gant. All right. All in favor of approving the minutes? Say aye.
Aye.
Okay. All opposed? All right. The motion passes. We're moving forward to amend or adopt the agenda. Any changes or amending of the agenda? No. Can I have a motion to adopt the agenda, please?
Motion to adopt the agenda as is.
I
Okay.
second.
All in favor? Aye.
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 All right, moving forward. So the superintendent report will be given today by Mr. Harris, I believe, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, go ahead, please.
All righty. So I will try and keep it brief and succinct. I had an amazing opportunity with Dr. Yeager, and we discussed the board's goal of reviewing several of the policies that have maybe a bit outdated and just require some updating so that we have best practices in the Clark County School District. As you all know, we have several policies that need updating and reviewing, amounting to a little bit over 100. And so we started really brainstorming what will be some great ways for us to tackle this type of project, knowing that, we are limited on time, but also we know that as soon as we can get the policies updated and enacted, it's best practice for us as a school system. And then we have policies in place that not just protect our staff and our students, but also our surrounding community. And so probably last week or the week before last, during our meeting, Dr. Yeager and I talked a bit about an idea that the incoming board members, who I appreciate the two of y'all being with us today, we could look at reviewing policies using kind of a subcommittee, sub-task force type model by which we could divide the policies based on the number and the area and assign specific departments to assist kind of as a department contact with those board members as those policies are being reviewed. I was going to try and share my screen, but it doesn't look like I have the ability because there was a document that I think would have been helpful for everyone to see. But ultimately, the idea is that right now we have a little bit over 170 policies to review. My understanding is that the board would like to have those policies reviewed before the end of this calendar year 2020. And so when I went through it, a good example is that our D policies, there's about 18 D policies that need to be reviewed. Those D policies correspond to our business and finance department. And so rather than us waiting and taking policies on, smaller chunks of 5 to 10, we could create subcommittees made up of 2 to 3 board members, definitely some policy committee board members who could then partner with our business service and finance department to review those policies. And between Dr. Yeager and I and the rest of the policy committee, we could set deadlines based on the number of policies. And so a good example would be our G policies, the policies we're doing now. There's still about 26 left to review. If my count was correct or my document might be updated. Oh, there's one left to review. Meredith?
We're going to get through the one on old business today, and then there will be one left, but some of them are still pending public comment.
Okay, so yeah, so we have some that are pending public comment. But a good example would have been when we started, there were a little more than 26. And so the same way that Meredith has partnered and been available to work with the entire policy committee to review those policies, we would like to do that in kind of a subcommittee format. And so if we were to go through each of our policies, and I believe policies D through K are those that all correspond to a respective department within the school system. And again, this of course will require the approval of Dr. Thomas, but we could work together to review those policies between now and December using that type of format. And again, I apologize, I'm not able to show it on the screen. I can't share my screen, but
I was trying to share it, but I haven't found it yet either. Sorry.
And I'm happy to take on questions, but just trying to think of an efficient process to get through the 150 plus policies that that the board would like to have reviewed before end of December. I'll add while we wait to see if Dr. Yeager can pull it up, that I think when we also look at the process by which we send policies from the subcommittees to Mr. Pruitt, that would also allow us to be able to get policies to him in a much more, I think, efficient manner. So that way he can kind of review them on a rolling basis. And then that way, as the policies are coming in, he has the ability to look at them and then send them to the Dr. Yeager as the policy committee chair and myself for us to put on the agenda. So it just kind of creates a process by which we're not waiting for the meeting to happen, but we can do the work intermittently. And then hopefully they will all be updated and we can just get back into a regular flow of reviewing and revising policies as they come up.
So did that share my screen? Did that come up? Your yellow thing?
No.
Oh, okay. I can't do it then. All right. Well, I will email you all this document and I guess we can talk about it by email. There was some tentative assignments of individuals to do subgroups, but y'all get to pick which subgroup you want to be on. So we'll iterate in email, I guess.
Can I ask a question about that table?
Yeah.
So when looking at the table, I see the subgroups and the assignments for each of the members and board elect members. It's up.
Oh.
Is that just on my, is that only on my screen? I have it up on my screen.
I don't see it.
Okay, then it's only up on my screen. And it's broken up by D through K, and it has the numbers to review on the next column, and then the members that are going to review. And it absolutely made sense to have some of the members elect who are going to join in this process to partner up with current members. So thank you for that. I really appreciate that. But my question on the far end is that the order that this is going to go in? And if so, do the people, for example, that are going to look at E through F or G in September or October, do they just wait for that period?
No. That's when they're sort of due. So you can look at them anytime. Definitely. Okay. You can start today. And if you're done sooner, what do you think, Lawrence? I don't want to hijack your idea, but
I agree 100%. I mean, the idea is no, you don't have to wait. Like, so that's one at the top that says policies D and they're 18 to review. That's with Ms. Gallagher and Dr. Yeager. No, they don't have to wait till October to review it. Actually, I'd encourage them to, I think we could work with our team. We can get with Chris and Jennifer and Byron in finance, and they could work with Dr. Yeager and Ms. Gallagher between now and October and go ahead and schedule those meetings and times to work through those policies beforehand. I think, honestly, the policies could be sent to Mr. Greiner, Mr. Byron, and Jennifer beforehand in finance and say, can you go ahead and review? The same way Meredith today, she'll bring us the HR policy that she's already reviewed. She's looked at it. She's looked at the practices of that department. How does it impact our staff and our processes? And then she makes the recommendation. She works with Mr. Pruitt to review for legal concerns and then brings it to the whole policy committee for their review. So yeah, no, you definitely have to wait till October. I would actually say the earlier the better.
Yeah.
We can just, like, some of the areas, I think, like J is student support. I mean, there's almost 45 policies in there that are more than 5 years old. And so that, I would imagine, they want to get started sooner than later, getting through those policies, working with those corresponding departments. And I will also just want to add, like, it's definitely a draft document. I made it a bit when I was under the weather, but in my mind, it made sense. So I had to put it on paper. I get these ideas in the middle of the night and just have to get it down on paper.
So I just emailed it to Angela. The other option I thought of is you could put the link to the Google Doc in the chat, and then everybody could click on that and see that. Those were the two ideas I just had about how to show this
That's a great
document.
idea. I can do that.
Dr. Yeager, I don't know if everyone else could see it, but it did pop up on my screen for a little while and I could see the grid.
Oh,
Everyone was talking about it. Everyone else may have been able to see it briefly as well. I think Dr. Gant's nodding.
There it is.
Right there.
Right.
okay. So it is sharing my screen then. So you see policy committee, policy review process proposal. Great. Okay. So yeah. So as you want to take it over again, Lawrence? I keep jumping in.
No, you're fine. I mean, I took the ideas. I took a conversation Dr. Yeager and I had, and just, try to put it on paper and then try to see if there's a way for us to build a process out of it. So again, first, I appreciate the policy committee being open to the incoming board members helping with this. I think it's going to be an amazing process for incoming board members to participate in, because policies ultimately will run school systems. So yeah, as you can see there, and again, the numbers may be a bit off, so I'll go back and update them. I was using some of the documents that I had available. But basically, yes, you don't have to go with the policy committee assignments. Those were, we were just, popping it as placeholders. I just want to make sure there was kind of equity among the division of the work, and that every incoming board member had a veteran board member that they could work with. I think that's a really great best practice, is then you can kind of learn from each other, talk about why do we do things this way? What are some of the background knowledge? So the idea was pairing an existing board member with an incoming board member. You can certainly, if you have the wherewithal and time to come into another committee, you want to join someone else's in addition to the two you have. I think Dr. Yeager's point is these are not set in stone. I think she is the policy committee chair. So ultimately, I believe, if I'm not wrong, like she'll allow you can pick your preference. I think it's going to allow you to pick your preference. What are some, which policies do you want to review? But ultimately, it'd be great to have everyone in at least two areas. And then I can work internally with our district leadership and Dr. Thomas, just to make sure we're all good internally with having staff, which is that fourth column, who will be available to go ahead and start reviewing the policy. So I can use mine, for example, the policies K. I would very much so in my office, I would work with my team. We would set probably internal meetings to go ahead and start going through those K policies together. I discussed it with our PR and communications manager, Beth Moore. I talked with Erin Thompson-Pavin in family engagement, and we would talk through those K policies. We would read them, review them. We'd make recommendations using the format that the policy committee uses right now, which is highlighting and strike throughs. And then we would use that format and we would upload those, we would share those policies with, in this example, Mr. Davis and Dr. Gant for your review. And so that way you all can see, or we could even invite you all to our meeting with us and we could do the work session together. And then we would work through those 15 policies. And then once they're ready, then we could send them off to Mr. Pruitt for his review. But because of our timeline, I obviously recognize that Mr. Pruitt is one man. And so I don't want him to probably every night be sleeping and thinking CCSD policy every day of his life, but he would have an opportunity to say, okay, I've received another group of policies from this subcommittee, and then he could review it, add his attorney's memo, and bring it to the policy committee as a whole. And so there will be probably some back and forth. I can imagine that as we review the policies in these subcommittees, that, and ultimately there should be back and forth conversation around, oh, let's not forget this, or this should be added. And as you see, as Dr. Yeager scrolling to the bottom, once they're done, it'll be the responsibility of that subcommittee and that corresponding department to be present, similar to how Meredith is here today to talk to us through the policy she reviewed. And so she's representing the HR department. If she had been working with, let's just say, Dr. Gant on this policy, they had been a subcommittee together, they would be here in the meeting to talk through the policies that they reviewed. But ultimately, you all as a policy committee should have already received them, because they would be uploaded in board docs. So you can see the changes that have been requested, and it's not you'll be able to review them weeks in advance. And so the bottom part kind of just gets quick to the point of, it'll be reviewed and discussed. Ultimately, hopefully it makes its way to the full board, and then there's going to be discussion and consideration. So I hope that was clear. Thank you for putting that up. It actually helped me out to see it on the screen versus just in my head.
Yeah, and so I guess this is a Google Doc. We'll send everyone the link, and you can add or subtract your names to the different subcommittees and even change the timeline if you want. I think those were just boiler, or those were just template, no, what's the word? Placeholders, thank you, placeholders for when we're trying to aim. And, it seems possible that this team, for example, the business services team, might get 6 of them done this month and 6 of them done next month and 6 of them done the next month, or something like that, instead of having all 18 come as a big block. So it's possible we could do these individual groups as they come through rather than put them all. I mean, I don't know what you think will work better, but let's see how the teams function. If the D team gets everything done and puts them forward, great. If they get 6 done and they're ready to put forward, that would also work, right, Lawrence? Don't you think?
Yeah, and I'm glad you said that, Dr. Yeager, because one thing you'll probably notice is that the policies that have a higher number were put at a later date. And so we can definitely change the deadline, but the idea was that, I mean, that student support area, as you on the policy committee know, there's a lot of policies there. I mean, 45, I may have even miscounted, so there could be more. That may take more time. And so I didn't want, right now it says whole-o-matics. I didn't want you to try to get all 45 policies done within 7 weeks. So, that's pushed all the way to, it doesn't have to be you, Ms.
And we appreciate that. Thank you very much.
But yeah, so it could be you get 15 done in September, 15 done in October, and finish it up by December. So I think the timeline is we want to make everyone aware that we want these sort of done by December, because that's when Cognia comes back and asks us how we're doing. But yeah, do the timeline as possible, because everybody has real lives. So, okay. Any other comments or questions about this proposed prioritization? Stop sharing. Okay, shaking heads. Greg's got a thumbs up. Dr. Maddox is not here, so I will try to touch base with her as soon as I can about what we're planning to do, since her name is on that list. But otherwise, yeah, Mr. Harris, maybe just send out the Google link to the whole team and share the document with everybody. Did you have any more to add with the superintendent report?
No, ma'am, that's it. I will clean up the document so that way when you share it, it'll have placeholders instead of people's names assigned, so people can plug it in. So that way it doesn't cause any confusion. So I'll work on that.
Okay, great.
I don't understand what you just said, Lawrence. I'm sorry.
That I'll just clear out. Right now, we had the names that I put in were honestly just based off of pairing veteran board members with incoming board members. But I do want to make sure that
I like that. I mean, if people want to change, but I would, instead of starting from scratch, I mean, that tells me where I'm starting. So,
yeah, I agree. I think you could leave the names there, and if somebody wants to scratch themselves out and put themselves somewhere else, then they can do that. Is that rather than delete everybody?
I think you did a great job, and let's just go with it as is, and with the dates and everything, and just start the process. And if there's switches, we make switches. But
okay, yes, sir. I'll make it happen. I won't touch anything.
Mumby, did you have a comment? I thought I saw your hand up.
I was just going to ask from I guess a subcommittee perspective, do the current members just kind of start setting when the meetings or decisions might start getting made about how this process works, or
for the subcommittees?
Mm-hmm.
I am very open to, in that committee that you and I are on, for you to take the lead. So whatever fits into
I have no idea what I'm doing.
But the thing is that first off, it's got to be your schedule, because I'm retired. So, and you don't have much time before you'll be back at work. So, so I can reach out to with Mr. Gaskins, but I think we need to, we'll talk. Are you on? Okay. Do I have your email address? I don't know. Do you have mine? Okay.
I mean, my email address is on the screen right now.
Oh, okay. Okay.
It also should be public at this point.
Okay.
But I guess my other question was, do all the meetings that the subcommittees have, they all need to be public and broadcasted and announced within 24 hours. Is
No,
that
no,
how?
no, because you're not a quorum. There's just two of you and then the staff. So you're not a quorum,
And actually, you're not part of the quorum anyway. So,
right?
Uh-huh.
really, no, we're fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
The results of what you come up with will be presented publicly like we're doing here. But in the discussions and the working with the staff, I think you can do those at your leisure. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
It's
Well,
enough.
And Lawrence, I think for the what you have with Greg and myself, I think is the K policies.
Yeah.
You all will let us know like how you want to. Yeah, I know you mentioned a few different departments that sort of intersect with those particular policies. So you'll let us know like if you want us to join you or what have you, or the process if that we want to take this.
Yes, ma'am. We have a cabinet meeting next week, and so
Okay.
my goal is to talk with our my colleagues, the other chiefs, and talk to them through the plan that has been discussed here today. And ideally, what I think would be a great way, and I'm happy to be the conduit, is to connect that corresponding chief with the two board members who'll be working on the policies, just to kind of do an introduction. So, for example, Dr. Moonby here, I can connect you with. I believe you're on two committees, but I connect you with those two departments through a separate email saying, this is, Mr. Davis, Dr. Moonby, who will also be working on these policies. Please make sure to schedule time with them as you work along. Because understanding that some of you all may be able to attend those work sessions, as you said, some of you may have the availability. Others may have a preference where, Dr. Gant, you may say, Lawrence, I prefer that you and your team just knock them out, go through those 15, then send them to me, yourself and Mr. Davis to review, and you'll get back to us on y'all's thoughts afterwards. So we can definitely be flexible in that. But yeah, if you just give me probably early next week to work with my colleagues and just talk, because they also need to know that this kind of work is coming their way. So
Sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm sort of feeling like I'm is an ad hoc committee member on all of these subcommittees because I'm the chair. So you can keep me in the loop, or you should keep me in the loop about what's going on if
Sure.
that's okay.
Sure.
So I can kind of keep everybody, I
Sure.
can have the 3-ring circus, be the ringmaster. So many ring circus, 7-ring circus. Okay, any other comments about it? We'll just see how it works. This is an experiment, but I hope it will get us where we need to be in 6 months. Okay, the only additional comments I want to make as the chair report is something that Lawrence and I also talked about during our meeting earlier this month, is the idea that the policy committee needs to hang its hat on the statement, does this policy support or impede equity progress in the district? So that's in our policy. It's in our policy manual. We want to think about all of these policies that we're about to start looking at, is we want to look at them through the strategic plan and through the equity lens that we have prioritized for the district. I also want to add student achievement to that, because it feels like whenever we look at a policy, we get a little bit lost in some of the noodly details, but we want to make sure that when we amend or change or revise a policy, we want to make sure we're looking at it through the lens of, how does this help student achievement? How does this improve our goals in terms of student equity? And that's just at least what I hope to bring in the coming months to this review and revision of policies, is to remind ourselves why we have these policies to begin with. So that would be my only chair report. Any questions about that? Okay. All right, so it's 5:03. Let's move on to the agenda. The next item on the agenda, I believe, is the old business. And I don't see Angela's screen anymore. I think I knocked it off. Do we want to bring it back up? I have board docs open in a separate window, but people might want to see. Okay. All right, so I believe, so we have GCRA 1 oh, that's not on there. Okay, that's been moved off. So we have GAAA. So this one came back to us from the last board meeting. And the reason it came back to us was because we had a public comment that related to the making sure that starting salaries were included in our non-discrimination equal opportunity employment. Mr. Pruitt, I don't know if you heard that part of the board meeting. I believe you were there. So did that make sense to you? And is it possible to add something? And I was thinking somewhere in part 2, a provision about hiring at appropriate starting salaries, because that apparently is a big problem in terms of.
I heard the comment, but I have no clue what it means.
Oh,
I mean,
okay. So Meredith, how do you decide a starting salary of a new hire?
It is really straightforward and has absolutely nothing to do with anything that can be discriminated against. They go straight on a grid based on degree and years of experience. If a degree is not required, it is 100% years of experience.
which is why I didn't understand what the comment meant.
That's what I don't understand. There's that scale, and the teacher's salary scale is set by the state. So teachers are 100% paid straight on the state scale, and then you can pull up, they're published on our website. And so I can say, well, I know a custodian is a G13 or whatever, you know, because that's public record, and go pull up that scale and say, okay, if I'm a custodian and I've got 6 years of experience, this is what they should give me for an opening salary. And that's exactly how it's plugged in. That's built into our pre-published on our website salary scales out for public comment. So I didn't hear the board comment that sent this back, so I was a little surprised. That's very, that process doesn't even really open itself up to discrimination.
Or negotiation.
Covered by what's already in here, because it would have to be on the basis of race, color, national origin, sex, whatever the case may be. So I'm not exactly sure what they're hoping to address, but that's the process for placing people. It really has nothing, there's no discretion, basically.
Let me, Meredith, let me just ask, and I'm just playing devil's advocate here, but in terms of experience, is there, and I can't think of anything, but I'm, you know, is it conceivable that there could be gender inequality because a particular job experience is not seen the same way as a traditional male job in that same, that was falling into that same background? I understand it's all based on years of experience. I'm just trying to.
Let me tell you how we verify experience, I think, to answer that question.
Okay.
When people are hired in, I'll go through this, I'll use myself as an example. I was given verification of employer forms, and you are to give them to all of your previous employers, and they can either give them back to you or they can submit them directly to the district. To use myself as an example, because I would fall into the female category, I sent mine off to the Department of Defense for my military experience, and given that I was in a role that did compliance and investigations and evaluation and all those sort of things, my previous employer submitted all my records of experience and I was given credit. I will say we're very liberal with what we count as experience. Basically, if they give us anything that we can say is comparable, we count it fully.
Okay.
Obviously, if you're applying to be a teacher, it's straight on the state salary scale and cut and dry. But for all other positions that go on the non-teacher scales, if they give us anything that we can count, we count it. We always err on the side of the employee with that. Like, say, for example, the person worked at one of the companies in town that does machining, and they were responsible for daily cleaning and maintenance of their own work area. We would count that as if they were trying to be a custodian now, because they did clean their equipment.
Okay.
If they give us anything that we can count, we try to err on the side of the employee, but we give them, and we actually give them quite a substantial amount of time to get those forms in. So say their employer lags in turning those in for some reason, if they bring them to us 90 days, 6 months after they were hired, we'll go back and make them right. Because we know sometimes that's beyond their control, and their employer may have had, you know, the only person who can fill out the form had a baby, or whatever the case may be. And we just try to be as liberal with the experience as we can be. If they give us anything that's relatively close, we count it, but we put them straight on the scale based on years of experience.
So maybe we could just put a sentence, and I just scribbled something out. Starting salary, and this would be like number 5. Starting salaries are not negotiated. They are set by the state and depend on years of experience. So that's practice, what you just said.
It is. I don't know that that's true, like for superintendent level. So I would not get into that in my job, because you guys hire the superintendent. So I think we'd have to be careful making it 100% apply to everyone. Maybe we could just say that starting salaries are placed on a grid based on years of experience, and Mike, help.
So,
Nicole might
well-
want to come in too.
Okay, so your teachers have a state scale, but you, like most districts, supplement it, so it's actually higher than that.
But we still publish that grid. We publish it with the local supplement.
Right. So you have that. Of course, that doesn't cover all the classified. I mean, I'm not sure what we're trying to get at here, frankly. You know,
So I have a
assigning years of
Oops, Dr. Gant, and then I think I hear Nicole Hall trying to chime in too.
Yes.
I think part of what's trying to be gotten at here, I do think there are times when people start in positions and where there is some discretion there. When I worked as a behavior specialist, and I've known other people who, you know, like they may have been on a certified scale, but the job was a little bit less clear cut. So for instance, it depended on the job description, right? And when people have to determine what are they going to count, right? Are they going to count my years as a psychologist, or are they going to count my years as a behavior specialist? They can't quite count that because not all school districts have behavior specialists. So will they count the amount of years I've been a certified school counselor, or just the amount of years I've been somewhat in a similar position of doing something? And I think that is where the discretion comes in, and that is where possible differences come in.
For sure, there's always
Agreed.
some degree of discretion in assigning years of experience, but I'm not sure what you're going to say about that in relation to discriminating on the basis of, you know, race, sex, age, disability, other than we won't pay you less because you're in a protected characteristic. I mean,
Maybe we can say starting salaries will be assigned based on predetermined job description based qualifications, and not related to any protected class. Does that
I'm going to let Dr. Hall chime in. Ms.
Well,
Hall?
I'm just following up on Dr. Gant, because that's where I see that this could be an issue, because there's some discretion. There's inherently the possibility for there to be some discrimination. So if it's discretion related to one's work or experience, where was that? You know, was it something that was highly valued or not? So I'm thinking that is where that piece for we want no discrimination in the policy, like Mr. Pruitt said, I don't know how you would word it, but for the question as to why that might be applicable or something that was commented on, I think it's due to that discretion piece, because there is some discretion in what is considered work experience.
what we have here now is we don't discriminate, and discrimination includes, number 1, refusing to hire, discharging, or otherwise discriminating against any individual with respect to compensation, terms, conditions, or privileges of employment because of such individuals' race, color, religion, national origin, sex, or age. I don't know what we're trying to say beyond that.
That's what I was just reading along with Mike, is we already say compensation can't be discriminated based on those categories. And even further, if you look down to number 2, it says limiting, segregating, or classifying employees or applicants in any way that would deprive or tend to deprive of employment opportunities or otherwise adversely affecting on basis of. And pay would certainly be an adverse effect. So I feel like numbers 1 and 2 already include that salary can't, salary, classification, title, all of those things have to be free from discrimination.
Ms. Hall, did you have a comment? Lit up.
No, I do. I agree. I see it. I just don't know how we would make it clearer that what that means. I get exactly what you're saying, and it sounds like it's already expressed in the policy as written. But just because there is that little piece of discretion in terms of experience, and that does affect where it falls on that grid, I think the comment may be, how do we make it more succinct, clear, or illustrate that experience piece won't be discrimination won't be used in that experience.
So,
Does that make any sense?
yeah. But are we mostly talking about starting salary where that assessment is done? So we could add possibly just the words starting salary, comma, compensation, comma, terms, comma, conditions.
Maybe after compensation, you could add to include starting salary.
Yeah.
Under number 1, where it says with respect to compensation to include starting salary.
Let me ask something else. What if there was, who's going to make that decision, Meredith, about level of experience? Is that
Normally it's real easy and real cut and dried, and we don't have this debated very often because we are so liberal in what we grant. For example, what Dr. Gant said, we look at anything that is comparable and relevant experience. Just because the other district might have a position with a different title than it's exactly what we have, if the experience is relevant, we count it. And because we do that and we err on giving the employees the benefit of the doubt, they don't tend to complain about a higher pay than they would get if we didn't give them.
Well, why don't we put that in the policy? That the school district errs towards the employee's advantage. I mean, however you said it makes me feel better. But it's not in the policy, and it's all based on who's in human resources, right?
Mr. Davis, I'm going to tell you right now, if they disagree with what the HR specialist asked, they're going to go up the chain to the point that if they don't like what we tell them in HR, our superintendent and then one of you guys will hear about it. And the fact that nobody's come and told y'all that means we're doing it that way. It makes me nervous when we've been told that we've got a goal of streaming down our policies to a way that's workable and easily interpretable. If we put things in that are as vague as we err on the side of the employee into policy, we didn't make it any more clear.
Okay.
We made it like, trust me, we got it, and it clearly says compensation. And if we wanted to include the words to include starting salary, while I do feel it's redundant, it's not really a hill I'm willing to die on.
What if we included the words assessing experience or experience assessment or something like that instead of starting salary? Because it sounds like that's what it comes down to, is the assessment of experience.
Yes.
Sure.
I like that. Yes.
That's a good wording, Dr. Yeager.
Okay.
Yeah, I like that.
Okay, so Angela, I think we have at least a semi-quorum or a agreement that so we would put it refusing to hire, discharge, or otherwise discriminating against any individual with respect to experience assessment would come first, right? Compensation, terms, conditions, or privileges of employment. Does that work for you, Meredith?
That works great. But to me, that's clearer. Would you put a comma after assessment for me? I think that helps a lot. That's the best wording I've heard.
Yes, I'm good with that.
Yeah, I like it. I like it.
Okay. What?
Could I maybe suggest that objective experience assessment. Maybe part of the issue is there's not a clear understanding of who or what this experience of assessment is. So perhaps if it were more clear that it's an objective sort of state level assessment of that experience, that would be a little bit more clear, rather than an individual sitting in an office determining point for point what someone's experience is.
Okay, so put the word objective in front of it.
Just a suggestion.
Okay, well, it was still has to go through the board, so we can add it and then subtract it later if someone doesn't. Okay,
I like it.
you like that? Okay.
Yeah, I like it.
Dr. Gant, Mr. Davis, can I get a motion?
I move that we accept, or we're not passing it, are we? Moving it forward, policy GAAA as amended.
Okay, can I get a second?
Yeah.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, thank you. Okay, GAM. This one was the one we passed having to do with communication, and Dr. Knox requested that we consider leaving the sentence about negative retaliation, that we consider keeping it in. That was his point.
I strongly agree with that. I don't know, especially now with all the, even if we have it in some other policy, and even though it's spelled out in you know, under the under this fair dismissal and all that kind of stuff, now would be the worst terrible time to take that wording out, because we've been hearing a lot from staff about school opening this year, and so I think Dr. Knox is exactly right. So we need to put that sentence back in.
The only question I have is that you're talking about that last sentence, right?
Yes.
Any negative employment. Okay. And it goes on to talk about it's contrary to the Board of Education policy and may be subject to disciplinary action by the Board of Education. What specific disciplinary action will the Board of Education take, seeing that we do not employ staff? Right. I mean, yes, the only is it the acceptance of a resignation, but we don't have a direct. That's not our purview, and so I guess I'm curious as to what that piece may mean.
So we could take that piece out, I think. I think John's point was that just the part about contrary to our policy, negative retaliation.
I would support putting a period after Board of Education policy and leaving out the last 7 or 8 words.
Okay. Would that make it better for you, Dr. Gant?
Did, and I can't remember originally from our policy meeting, but I think wasn't the argument or the point was that this was actually listed somewhere else or covered in other policies?
Yes.
You're correct, Dr. Gant. It's in one of your B policies. And then the other part of it is covered in the Fair Dismissal Act. And then the complementary processes for the dismissal of classified employees. It's covered dismissal and what you can dismiss people for and have, you know, retaliatory actions are covered in other policies. But if y'all want to leave this sentence in, it's not, you know, gonna make the policy any harder to administer. If it means something to somebody, then by all means, please leave it in.
I just think the optics would not be good. And I don't, it's just a few words.
Yeah, I'm okay with leaving it in, you know, with taking that last piece out. And then also just going back to, I know our goal ultimately is to not streamline, but take out extra stuff that we don't be repetitive. But I would be okay leaving it in.
Okay, sounds like we have,
Mr. Gant.
okay, Meredith. Mr. Pruitt, oh, he disappeared. Did you have any thoughts on this, leaving this in? You're okay with it?
Nothing I haven't already said.
All right. Can I have a motion, please?
I move that we adopt policy GAM or pass it forward, policy GAM as amended.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. All right. GBCR1. This one had some public comment. This was where we discussed our minority staff recruitment. And there was some point made that we focus too much on historically Black and other minority serving institutions, that we also want to make sure that we include other typical institutions. And I know this may seem kind of silly, but again, this is public comment, so we want to take it seriously that they felt that the policy was slighting, like, could we recruit from UGA, which I would not say in any is a minority serving institution. So Meredith, is there a way that we could modify this, or Mr. Harris, if you have ideas about how to modify this to be more open to all institutions that have minority students?
Yeah, I mean, I was just thinking you could change it to say, we could add a number 2. Oh, Angela, you went away from it. Systematic. I don't know about heart. Yeah, systematic visiting of institutions of higher education, including historically Black and other minority serving institutions. I don't know if higher learning is necessary if you have institutions of higher education in the beginning.
Yep.
Okay, can I make a point here? If you would look, this part that we're doing is actually under the heading that says,
Right.
this is how we ensure minority recruitment is not left to chance. So maybe it goes up above it. It talks about, here we go, recognizes there's a shortage of minority teachers, go up above the minority recruitment plan, because that part is specifically addressing minorities. So maybe we need to get back to the general recruitment plan and see if there's something that could be added in that part to address non-minorities.
Well, I think the point of the public comment was that there are Black students at UGA and we want to recruit them as well.
Okay.
So it wouldn't be a general recruitment plan, it would be a minority
okay.
recruitment plan at all universities. So I think Mr. Harris's comment about adding the words higher education, all institutes of higher education at the beginning, that sounded good to me.
I just think it waters it down myself. I mean, if you go to UGA, you're going to recruit you're going to recruit
Higher learning.
who comes to the table. But I think by saying historically Black and minority institutions, I think you're making we have not always done that. So I was here at a time when I did not see that being done. And that's after, I'm trying to think who, we had a minority recruiter, and then he moved on, and the position never got replaced. And that was in about 2010.
So how about instead of saying as well as, we say especially? I believe that was the original.
Or including historically Black and other minority serving institutions instead of as well as.
Does that not, like Mr. Davis mentioned, does that not water down the entire purpose of this section of?
I kind of agree that it does.
I don't think so.
I mean, the purpose of this portion of this policy is to acknowledge that recruitment in these other institutions does not happen under normal circumstances. And so you are creating an exemption outside of the norm. So if you include the norm within that exemption and the exemption becomes including, then you have essentially obliterated the entire point of this particular portion of the policy. So you either remove the policy altogether, or you make it clear that this is outside of the norm.
So I would disagree, only because I think that, and I don't know about education. I can only speak from the law part of it. But there were certain. So I went to Mercer, a predominantly white institution, but we had certain clubs and organizations that focused on minority students who wanted to go into pre-law. So while somebody could come to Mercer and recruit, it was a specific thing to come and approach these particular organizations to recruit minority students. So I like what Mr. Harris said, and I like that piece including because I think it can be different. I get what you're saying about creating an exemption that kind of nullifies the purpose of it. But I think in certain situations at larger schools that they could have some very small minority organizations, clubs that would benefit from being recruited that might not necessarily get that same platform in your normal recruitment process. But I've never been recruited as a teacher, so I don't know if that is how it would work in the education industry or not.
Dr. Yeager, if I could add, I think, in my perspective, one of the reasons for, I think, adding the systematic visiting of institutions of higher education, including HBCUs and minority serving institutions, is always.
Lawrence, please speak up, or something's wrong with the sound.
I think it's when Ms. Hall is not muted, we get some feedback. Go ahead, Lawrence.
Sorry, I'll just keep it brief. I was just saying, I think my purposes of adding the systematic visiting of institutions of higher education, including HBCUs and MSIs, was mainly around the idea of also recognizing that HBCUs and MSIs are institutions of higher education. And so I think, while there are, students of color who also attend institutions that are not HBCUs and MSIs, such as Ms. Hull's point, Mercer, whether it's, Georgia State or these, some of these other great institutions, we're still recruiting there, specifically targeting minority staff members, but we're also making sure that we're inclusive of that HBCUs and MSIs are. Can you hear me? Oh, sorry, I didn't know if you could. That's it, I'm done. Could you hear me on that one, Dr. Yeager?
Yeah,
Oh,
I did.
sorry.
Yeah, I think I think I agree with you. Dr. Anderson, are you comfortable with that, or you want to argue otherwise?
I'm still just wondering why this policy would be in here in the frame, in the reference that it is, if the intent of it is not to highlight that we are going to reach out to institutions, HBCUs, and minority serving institutions specifically to recruit students from those specific institutions. We already recruit from predominantly white institutions. PWIs are not in question here. Whether it's groups within the PWIs or just the PWIs in and of themselves, we already do that. And so I feel like it waters down the impact of this policy by then saying that, oh, well, why not just go ahead and include PWIs anyway? That seems to me not the original purpose of this policy. So I disagree, but it's okay. I can't even vote. So
again, I'm trying to translate the point that I got from the public comment, which was that there are minorities at PWIs, which is a new word for me. And so maybe we want to make sure, as Ms. Hall said, minority organizations within.
And maybe highlighting minority organizations is a good way to go. 2 comments. If we look right above number 1, first of all, what it says, in order to ensure, can we make that an E? Because that's going to bother me. But in order to ensure that minority recruitment is not left to chance, the following procedures, this is where it talks about the HBCUs and other minority colleges, are done in addition to the general procedures listed above, which are targeting the predominantly white traditional colleges. It's what Lawrence says. It's recognizing that in addition to this stuff that we're doing for these large, typically recognized university established colleges, we're also going to make sure we visit these specific places and recognize that their candidates are good. In fact, I'll typically tell you that a teacher candidate from an HBCU based out of Atlanta is going to probably be the best one I'm going to hire. They're fabulous, and we want to highlight that that's important and that their candidates and their programs are good. But that's why it says, in addition to the stuff that we do above, which addresses those other schools. And so maybe, and to Ms. Hall's point, we could add something in to say, instead of institutions of higher learning, we could also say something like to and including, I'm not sure what would be the right wording, maybe minority represented clubs and academic groups within other colleges and institutions, to recognize that those professional minority groupings do exist in other places. But I do strongly agree that this section is purely to talk about, in addition to this other stuff that we go and do all the time, we really want to recognize that these are valuable programs where we get good candidates who are a great fit for our students.
I do also want to acknowledge really quickly, and I'm gonna stop talking, Dr. Yeager, I promise, is that I don't want for those who may be watching understand, like, institutes of higher education is not synonymous with a PWI. And so I just want to make sure we understand that. I know that we're kind of talking at it as if saying it here is separate, and we're pointing it out as like a predominantly, you can be, institute of higher education exists around the world. I mean, Oxford, I mean, universities in South Africa and in different countries, like those are institutes of higher education. And so I don't want us to think that, you know, that terminology is synonymous with a PWI. It's just wanted to clarify that.
Thank you. Yeah.
That's a good point.
So what are we talking about? What's the, I mean, because I'm in right now, I feel like we're in a discussion like the all lives matter versus the you know, Black Lives Matter discussion. So I know that's not where we're going, but that's what I mean. I feel like we're kind of in that discussion. And so what kind of wording are we talking about changing this?
So again, I think the idea was that there are minority teacher candidates at all
So
institutions.
I understand that, but how are we talking about changing the wording of this?
Systematic visiting of institutes of higher learning, and I would be happy with especially as opposed to including historically Black and other minority serving institutions. We don't need higher learning twice. In order to interview teacher candidates to apply for employment and encourage candidates to apply for employment. I'm just trying to read the tiny writing.
I can't support that myself. That's just one vote.
So you don't like the adding of institutes of higher learning?
It sounds like an afterthought. And I'm just being real.
Okay.
Because the whole section is minority recruitment. So now if we want to word it and say, you know, historically Black and minority institutions and clubs of other institutions or something like that. I mean, it sounds very awkward to me, but if we wanted to do something like that, I'm not a wordsmith, so I don't know how to phrase it, but the way that you said it, Trish, I can't support it myself.
Systematic visiting of institutes of higher learning, especially historically Black and other minority serving institutions, in order to interview teacher candidates and encourage candidates to apply for employment.
Could we possibly say minority serving institutions and or organizations?
There you go.
Within.
Okay. Does that, you don't need the and or, you could just do or.
Mm. And that would, I think, encompass not only organizations within predominantly white universities, but also, you know, other professional organizations that exist that, you know.
Very good point.
That represent, yeah.
Okay.
I like that.
under
like-
I like that.
regulations.
Ms. Hall, you're on board with that? Okay, good. Dr. Gant? She's giving her thumbs up. Okay, woof. Did we get
Okay.
to it? All right. Okay. Mr. Harris, are you happy with that? Thumbs up. All right. Do I have a motion?
I move that we move forward regulation GBC-R to the entire board.
Second.
Second, all in favor? Aye?
Aye.
Aye. All right, moving on. Goodness, it's only 5:39. Now I know some of you have to leave at 6. So let's get through. So GBRH and GBRH1 is pretty easy, I think. We've just moved what's in the reg up to rescind the reg and move what's in the reg up to the policy. That's my understanding. Is that your understanding, Meredith?
No, GBRHR1 was the only one I thought I was going to have today. So the other ones were a little bit of a surprise. GBRHR1, I have to apologize because Greg and I got to talking about RIFs and things of that nature, and I answered some questions wrong that you guys had. I spoke from a vacation leave point of view instead of a sick leave point of view. So I reached out to Mr. Harris and asked him, could he pull this reg back? Because I gave y'all the wrong information. And really about 30 minutes after we got off the Zoom call, I texted Lynn and said, oh no, I answered their question backwards. We kind of sidetracked into a RIF conversation, and I just want to apologize because I did give you the wrong information. If you go, we struck all this and moved it into the main part of the policy. So Angela, if you'll go up to the main part of the policy, we added a little section that talks about, here you go. However, when an employee is terminated from employment with the Clark County School District for cause other than elimination of position or other reduction in force, he or she will not be paid the remainder of his accumulated sick leave. And what we were basically adding was that for cause other than reduction in force or elimination of position. The reason why that doesn't apply to that, and I was answering the question from a vacation point of view, is sick leave is not something that is purely, I guess, at the discretion of the local district like vacation is. Vacation pay, we fully fund. Sick leave is partially funded by the state because it rolls into TRS. And so they have some guidance and some regs that talk about what we do with sick leave. They're the ones who dictate the 1.25 accrual rate, so forth and so on. And they make no provision at all for us having the ability to pay out sick leave. They don't say we specifically can't. They just basically say the district must choose to fund it 100%, which we have never budgeted. The reason we have never budgeted to do that is because typically people do one of two things with their sick leave. If they leave us and go somewhere else, they take it with them. Sick leave goes with them from district to district. We transfer in days, back and forth all the time. It's actually done as part of your verification of employment process. And so their sick leave doesn't go away unless they never go to work in another district again. And then if they retire, they basically get a point for point credit, which allows them to either retire early or add on to their years of experience as they go into retirement, however you want to look at it. And it's unlimited. We don't limit that. And so we never cash people out in sick leave for that reason. And so we just wanted to make sure we made that distinction and remove that wording that says for cause other than elimination of position or reduction in force. He or she will be not paid the remainder of the sick leave. We basically want to go back to the wording that was in the reg. And that's because I answered your question poorly. I answered it for vacation and said we pay it out on term or on end of employment. And that is completely my fault. For Dr. Gant specifically asked, and I gave her the wrong information. I gave her the information for vacation instead of sick leave. And so the confusion was really caused by my poor answer to this question.
So I think what we're saying is that third paragraph under B, that whole third paragraph just needs to go away, right? Because
it needs to match what's in the bottom paragraph of the old reg, because that was what we did. If you go over to the reg, it says, here you go. However, when an employee is terminated from employment with the Clark County School District, he or she will not be paid the remainder of his accumulated sick leave. They don't lose it, but they don't get paid it either. It rolls to wherever they go or into retirement. And it can hang on for a long time. Say I'm a para and I decide I want to take a 5-year hiatus to be home and raise a child. And I come back and now I'm going to work in Clark County, whereas I worked in Madison County. We'll still take that time after all those years and roll them back in for them. And so it doesn't go away. It just doesn't cash out, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Really, the fact is we never pay out sick leave, period, ever.
No.
And we really couldn't, because there's this old statute on it that was never funded. Basically, if anybody did pay out sick leave, they'd have to do it with strictly local funds. They couldn't use any QBE, so nobody does it. So.
And to Mike's point, I did poll the other districts just to see, does anybody choose to poll that out of local funds? We have a GASPA group that we use, and I couldn't find one single district that was represented in that group, which is pretty wide ranging across the state, that is using local funds to pay that. That's not 100% accurate, but it's a decent survey.
And this is how people.
So you would remove that bottom. There you go.
Okay. So we're back to, yeah, so we're back to just moving the existing reg into the policy and not adding any extra words about sick leave.
That's correct.
Okay, that makes it easier, right? Did this one move through already? I don't have any, did we push this through? And no, it didn't go. We pulled it back. Okay, great. Thank you for that reminder. Okay, so we pulled this
I have
one
a
back.
question.
Go ahead.
So could you just clarify what reduction in force is?
A reduction in force would be, it's a fancy word for a layoff. In a school district, I wasn't even in the school district the last time this happened. Greg can speak to maybe a little bit more now. You were in the school district when this happened.
I was laid off.
Basically, in a severe recession where state funds are cut to the point that the district can no longer employ as many people as they do, and actual positions are eliminated for that. And there's an entirely separate policy that details exactly how a RIF works, how reduction in force works, and what we are to follow to do that. And this is really not the best place for that to be included, because it is so specifically outlined in our reduction in force policy.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, it means that for financial reasons, they can ignore things like tenure, right? It's a very special policy that they can fire whoever they want because of the very severe economic conditions. At least that's what UGA talks about when they talk about reduction in force. Tenure doesn't protect you.
It doesn't entirely protect you, you're correct, but there's still a very specific process that you have to go through. So it's not, I think universities may have a little more leeway with it than we policy.
It's probably good. Okay.
That was a statute back during the Great Recession. They passed saying that you could not use seniority as the only criteria for a layoff for a RIF.
Yeah, good. Okay. All right. So putting 4 and 5 together. Do I have a motion to move these forward? Oh, sorry, Greg.
Yeah, upon looking at it again, and given the situation we're in now, if you look at under sick leave, A sick leave, the first point 1, it talks about reasons that what the purpose of sick leave is used for. And it says exposure to contagious diseases where the health of others as certified by a medical doctor would be endangered by attendance at work. In light of where we're at now with the COVID-19, I'm not smart enough to understand if that alters that at all.
I think we actually just put that, this was just revised in June.
Was it?
And I think part of the revision was adding that 1B you're talking about.
Okay. I'm just trying to figure, I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel or anything, but I'm trying to figure out what happens if you know, I've been in a situation where I know I've been exposed because one of my students just tested positive. But I'm going to have to get a certification from a medical doctor saying that I was exposed in my classroom and that I'm having to be tested. And so I'm out of work because I'm waiting for a test result.
No, I don't think that's the, I don't think
No,
so.
that,
Noted.
that would not be it at all. In fact, you would follow the FFCRA process for determining any leave that was necessary. All of that's regulated with that and with FMLA. And we have a whole separate policy and FAQ that we're publishing to our employees on that. And, you know, it still remains to be seen if you're a teacher exposed in the line of work, is it a workers' comp? You know, I mean, there's all these things that are going to roll out as this happens, but this is purely just saying, you know, if you're exposed to something, you just need to tell us. Normally, you're going to tell us, you know, what you were exposed to so we can make sure we don't need to notify others within confidentiality parameters and things like that. I don't think this limits us in any way from working with employees under the current situation.
I think what it means is that they can use their sick leave if they want to not return to work, right?
Right, but that's actually codified. It's in the FFCRA and the FMLA federal guidance that's out there as well. And so, you know, with our goal being not to restate the law and restate things like that within our policy and just follow them.
Well, I think that's an additional sick leave that the federal government gave us. And so I think what Dr. Yeager said is right. This was just adding this, but making sure that the employees know this is something you can use your sick leave for, and we're not going to fight your district funded sick leave.
That's
you
right.
have, not the new stuff that you have under FFCRA.
Yeah. And isn't it partly covered by ADA type things too, where you can, I mean, I know people, some faculty are at UGA are applying for ADA exemptions because they have medical risks, and UGA is requiring us to have medical documentation for that request. So the part about certified by a medical doctor, that's the part where you just have to provide evidence for it.
Yeah, ADA is another ball of wax.
Okay. Stay away from that one.
Yeah, stay away
Greg, are you satisfied with that answer?
No, I'm not going to hold this up. I do want to, I'm just bringing these up because it just caught my attention, even though, as was pointed out to me, I was in on the discussion a few months ago, but you know,
Right.
that's the advantage of being 69. I can be forgetful. There's another line under extended leave of absence, K, number 2, where it says an employee must apply for extended leave of absence at least 15 days in advance of the date such leave will commence. Does the, you know, we've put out a letter to the employees talking about during this upcoming school year, you know, 2 weeks sick time, provided they have the seniority to have accumulated that. Plus, they can apply for extended leave of absence unpaid. Is that, Meredith, is that all consistent with that, the way it's written into that extended leave of absence policy, or do you still need 15 days notice, or how does that work?
I believe that this is after FMLA. It's in addition to any leave which an employee is entitled to under the FMLA Act. They can go an additional one-time 60-day leave of absence. If you look at number 5, it talks about is limited to, it's a one-time use, 60 days. A lot of times it's used, say we hire a pregnant teacher and they don't have, they don't qualify for FMLA. They can use this one-time 60-day leave of absence. Say someone's undergoing cancer treatment and it requires more than a year. They're a good employee, but it takes a year and 2 weeks. Great, they can have this one-time leave of absence to recover and return to the workforce. But this is in addition to FMLA, and we actually were working through this process with an employee today. Once you're approaching the end of your FMLA, HR reaches out to you, our HR specialist who handles that, and she says, you're approaching the end of your FMLA period, do you want to apply for your one-time 60-day leave of absence? If they indicate yes, then again, about 2 weeks before that's scheduled to be up, 2 to 3 weeks, we reach out to them again and say, you're approaching the end of this one-time 60-day extension. Where are you? Do you anticipate being able to return to work? It's a fluid conversation, and the employee is notified all along. But this is not the same as what you're asking about for teachers who have got, say, a high-risk individual in their household. That's not this section of the policy.
This is in addition to FMLA, so
This
that
is after your FMLA ends. So,
Or if you don't have FMLA because you haven't been with us a full
I
year.
see. So,
or they don't qualify,
okay.
right?
Okay.
Okay, here's my last question, Meredith, and this is a general question. With all the comments we got when Human Resources came out with a letter to all the staff about 2 weeks ago, there was a lot of comment that board members heard, concerns that board members heard. Is there anything that Human Resources said, well, my gosh, these employees have a legitimate claim, a legitimate concern, but their hands are tied because the board has adopted GBRH and our hands are tied? Is there anything that we need to change in terms of our current situation?
I think that's a very valid question. I don't think the policy is tying our hands in any way. I think the current situation is just difficult. The guidance that comes out at both the federal and state level is ever changing and new, which is always hard to navigate. I don't feel the policy is making it hard for us to administer leave as best we can. I think, we're in HR, just like with me answering the question wrong that Dr. Gant asked me, we're going to make mistakes, but if somebody points them out, we've got to be committed to fixing them and making it right and being open to hearing people, which I feel like we are. I just think that with all of this new stuff going on, and how rapidly things are changing, the caseload's changing, whether or not, safety is at risk or is not at risk is something we're having to continually assess and honestly consult with Mike on all the time for, okay, how do we interpret this new thing that came out? What is it? And how do we actually make this happen so that we can make sure we're following everything that we need to follow? But I don't feel that the policy ties our hands in any way as far as taking care of our employees well.
Can I ask really quickly, Meredith? I was not involved in the discussions at all about this policy, so this may be completely irrelevant, but I am curious about what happens when the leave of absences and the sick leaves are due to occupational hazard, and how occupational hazard ties into the staff having to take sick leave that is on their dime because they're earning this as they go along. And if they haven't earned it, then they're having to figure out a way to maneuver this policy so it works for them with the extended leave of absence. What happens when it's due to occupational hazard? So exposure to COVID within the workplace.
Mike can help me. I feel like if they're exposed to something within the workplace, that's going to fall under workers' comp, which is going to be a different process. However, Mike may be able to shoot that down for me. That would be my gut for anything else they're exposed to within the workforce. Say it was a bloodborne pathogen or whatever the case may be. They wouldn't be through this normal process with us. They would be through workers' comp. But that's not going to include somebody who, say, lives with an elderly person who's considered high risk and they're scared to come back to work. That's going to be a different situation that we've got to figure out how to navigate. And is there a possible accommodation we can make? And they have to be reviewed on a case-by-case basis, but I don't.
Well, I don't understand the parameters of workman's comp, but I believe that one of those parameters is the understanding that you walking into the occupation have the understanding that these are the potential risks. But this is not necessarily that situation. I don't believe that these teachers are walking or staff total are walking into the situation understanding the potential risk. They're just kind of being forced their hand. So is that the same as what workman's comp would cover?
Mike,
I'm
I've
fast-
had something like this
for
tested through
clarity.
workers' comp. So do you have a way in? I can tell you that HIV exposure for a nurse would be, but Mike, help me out.
My turn.
Go.
So, yes, of course, workers' comp covers any kind of on-the-job injury. Now, that's usually cut and dried. Causation is what you're talking about. So sometimes, one of the big issues in workers' comp is causation. Did you actually hurt your back on the job, or did you hurt it this weekend when you went snow skiing? And, and that's what workers' comp insurance companies investigate. They do all that. Now, in this world of infectious disease, that's all really up in the air right now. And it's going to be, it's under unless there's just some carve out for it where it's handled differently, then it's going to be the same causation analysis that you always had to do. Can the employee prove that they contracted this disease on the job versus somewhere else? I don't know that medical technology is able to do that yet. So work comp carriers are not going to be anxious to jump in and extend work comp where, they don't have pretty good proof that the exposure actually occurred on the job versus somewhere else.
From a public health perspective, I would argue that contact tracing may actually sort of kind of mitigate some of what you're saying by creating a causal effect that infection is occurring within the school district. And so I'm just trying to say there should be some preparation for workman's comp where causation can actually, that pathway of causation can actually possibly be proven.
Yeah, I mean, that's all state law. It goes through the work, the terms of coverage are dictated by state law. The determinations are made by the Georgia Workers' Compensation Board. So they'll deal with all that.
I'm
Okay,
just,
fair enough.
again, when you see workman's comp, I guess I look at it. I mean, I spent 15 years as a factory worker, and so I've been on workman's comp, but it was an injury that was sustained at work, and I was out for at least week, typically multiple weeks. Now, I see a situation where, we have a teacher who finds out on Wednesday that the student she taught on Tuesday tested positive. And so that teacher has to make a decision, and presumably we've got, we got building leadership, we got human resources, everybody's being concerned, and I get that. I'm just trying to figure out if that teacher is out for 2 days, he or she is not going through the workman's comp process. If they are self-quarantining themselves for 2 days, hopefully they can get a test to confirm whether or not they're affected or not. But it may be 4 days. But I don't see how they're going to run and go online and apply for workers' comp for a couple of days.
They're not, Greg, but what you're talking about is outside the scope of this policy. That would be exactly what FFCRA was developed for, is this current situation. It's up to 2 weeks of leave, which covers the incubation period that's recognized as the standard for COVID, 14 days, basically, of paid leave for a COVID-related exposure. That's not in this policy, though. They wouldn't be, it's in addition to their sick leave for that exposure quarantine.
So where is that policy?
There's not a policy. It's the FFCRA.
Federal.
It's like FMLA. But it wouldn't be in this.
What's it stand for?
Families First Coronavirus Response Act. That's the bill that Congress passed a couple months ago that gave extended FMLA and also paid sick leave under some circumstances. If I could jump in, and Greg's question is absolutely fundamental to what the district's going to have to face here pretty soon, but it's got to be part of your reopening plan. I don't think you're going to fix it here in your sick leave policy.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough.
Okay. so as
I'll
it-
go ahead and move this forward. Policy GBRH, move it forward to the
And
entire,
it's associated reg.
and then associated reg.
Okay. Do I have a second? Dr. Gant, I know you got to go pretty soon.
Yep, I'm getting ready to, I have to,
Okay.
but yes, second.
Okay. So I vote to move forward. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Okay, that passes. All right. Since I know Dr. Gant has to leave, we lose our quorum. So I guess that means we are done for tonight. We did not get to any of the new business, which we're sort of revisiting the B policies. We can either hold an additional meeting before the next board meeting, if you're willing to do that, or Lawrence and I can work on them online and do email, but probably that's not really legal. So we probably should meet a second time. Are people available to meet? Potentially, let's see, what's the calendar? The next board meeting is, well, the next work session is August 6th. So we might be looking at a policy meeting on Thursday, the 30th, potentially, or Thursday, the 23rd.
I can do the 30th.
I should be able to do the 30th. Dr. Yeager, I'll let you know for sure.
Okay.
I can't do
we'll-
the 23rd.
Okay, so we'll tentatively plan an extra board policy committee meeting on the 30th of July to address what's our new business, which was looking at adjusting or reviewing the B policies that were highlighted by Cognia in the report. So if you haven't looked at the Cognia report and where they mention these policies, maybe I'll write a little paragraph summarizing what Mr. Harris and I talked about in advance, so we know what we're facing. Does that work? And Mr. Pruitt, did you want to touch base before the 30th?
Either way, it's fine with me. Do you want to do that at 4 or 4:30? I know we had some confusion today.
So I'm good at 4, but I know other people have issues at 4 early, or maybe it's just Dr. Maddox. I'm okay with 4:30. Okay, everyone seems okay at 4:30. 4:30 on the 30th. Okay, thank you, everyone. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor? Okay, thanks, everyone.
See you in an hour.
Have a nice evening. Those of you that do not have to show up in an hour, but